Hey there, we're esquared Photography. I'm Erin.
And I'm Emily, and we are here to keep things simple and fun.
Have you ever sat there and wondered, how do these photographers get that nice blur in their photos? I can't do it on my DSLR camera. Maybe you can do it on your phone, but you can't figure it out on your camera. Well, we're here to explain all of the different steps and to keep it super simple for you.
Make sure to watch all the way to the end because we have a practice sheet that's going to help you get even better.
We promise to have you entering your next photo session and editing session feeling super confident and at ease.
For the best photography tips and tricks, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for future notifications.
All right, so when it comes to having that nice, blurry, creamy background, there are two things that you need to think of. One, you need to think of your aperture, and two, you need to think of something called depth of field, which we're going to get into.
And if you're still a little uneasy with what aperture is, make sure to check out our video about aperture, ISO, and shutter.
All right, so we're going to start with aperture, and you might hear it called f-stop as well. So aperture f-stop is just how open or closed the lens is.
Okay, so a large aperture would be something like an f-stop of 1.2. This meaning the lens is more open and there's more blur in the background of your image generally when you have a lower f-stop number.
So lower f-stop number means large aperture. That can get a little bit confusing, but don't get too wrapped up in it.
So now let's shift to what a small aperture is going to give you. Okay, there's going to be less light coming in, and it's going to be a smaller aperture would be a higher f-stop number. So for example, an f7, the lens is less open and you're going to get less blur. So in this picture here that you're looking at, we used an f7 because we wanted to make sure everybody in the picture was nice and crisp. But as you can notice, there's not much of the creamy, dreamy background in the back.
All right, the second part besides aperture that you can consider to get even more of a blur in your photos, if you're not getting it and maybe you're at an f-stop of 1.8 or whatever it might be, here's some reasons maybe why. So it's called the depth of field. So the depth of field is how far you are from your subject, but then also how far the subject is from the background. Okay, so let's think about settings. So for example, if you have a setting in an f-stop set at 1.4 and you're close to the person, you're going to have more blur. If you have a setting of f1.4 and you're further away from the person, that background is going to have less blur. So something else to consider then is to get even more blur. Like you see here, there's a lot of blur in the background. You can barely tell what it is. Well, obviously it's trees, but it's a very blurred version of some trees in the background. We have pulled Lily very far away from the background, but we're also very close to her. So if you're close and they're pulled away from the background and your f-stop is a very low number, meaning large aperture, you're gonna have the highest amount of blur that you could possibly get.
So let's jump into what are the settings we are going to use if we have different groups of people. So if we have one person, we are going to set our f-stop or aperture at 2.2 because we're going to try to get the best blur we can get. If we move up to a group of people like a small family, 2 to 4 people, we're going to shoot, depending on the way we set them up, do we have them in a straight row, do we have them in a couple rows, we're going to shoot anywhere from a 2.5 up to a 3.5. And the larger the groups, the higher the f-stop's going to get. So we get every single person in focus.
Okay, so what's the difference between these two photos here, for example? The ladies on top, we shot at an f3.2, and the gentleman on the bottom, we shot at an f7. So the reason we did that was because the ladies have their feet in a nice straight line. Usually that's what we instruct them to do. And so when they're in a nice straight line, that allows us to have a lower number for our f-stop. Whereas the gentlemen are in 2 different rows, so we had to crank up our f-stop because there's an additional row of people or additional depth of people. You can look at it that way. Now, if we wanted to, for example, in the bottom one, there isn't a whole lot of blur in the background, and that's okay. That's going to be difficult to do. But in the top one, when they're all in that nice straight line, we could possibly have gotten more blur by either getting closer to the ladies or pulling the ladies way further away from that backdrop there, giving the background a little bit more of a blur.
Now that you know how to create that beautiful blur in the back of your photos, we have something that we have just for you.
So you're going to find in the description below a link to our freebie. And this free guide is a little checklist on camera settings, but it is also a little practice sheet to get you outside shooting in manual mode and testing out all of these different settings to see if you can obtain that blur that you're looking for. Also, we have provided an answer key to go along with those worksheets.
So leave a comment down below with what is one thing that you were trying to obtain when getting that blur that just wasn't there. What were you missing? Let us know below.
Don't forget to download your little free cheat sheet below in your worksheet. And if this video was helpful, make sure to like and subscribe and share this with a friend so we know to make more videos just like this one.
Make sure to check out future videos just like this one, and we will see you next time.